When hearing the name Blues Brothers, one might immediately think of the side-ripping humor of comedians John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. However, before the movie Blues Brothers, there was Tom and Dick Smothers, the comedic pair of brothers who gave laughter to audiences as the Smothers Brothers. There was a pair of black blues brothers who migrated from the south to the north, setting their gritty storytelling blues in a city called Chicago. Otis, Big Smoky Smothers, and Abe, Little Smoky Smothers are the Smothers Brothers of blues. Mississippi Delta. Contrary to popular belief, the Chicago Blues did not begin in Chicago. It began in the Mississippi Delta. The Mississippi Delta is a northwest section of the United States in the state of Mississippi. It lies between the Mississippi and Yazoo rivers. Known as the most southern place on earth, not because of its location, but because of its distinct racial, culture, and economic history. The Delta was one of the richest cotton-growing areas in the nation on some of the most fertile land. Going to Chicago. The agriculture economy at that time did not support many jobs or businesses. These women and men who had worked all their lives and made other men rich went north where they had heard about jobs, good living, and blues music. Leaving behind their hard work, sadness, and juke joints, they headed to a place much better than the lives they had once knew. They took with them the Delta Blues.
Well, this is from Smokey Smothers. I'm wishing every one of my blues fans and everybody a very Merry Christmas. I got my eyes on you. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. Let you go. Turn your lamp down low. Turn your lamp down low. Turn your lamp low because I love you.
During Indian removal, tribes were forced west of the Mississippi. Many slaves were brought up to Delta towns by riverboat from slave markets in New Orleans or from Mississippi and Louisville. By the 19th century, cotton had become Delta's premier crop. There was high international demand. Mills in New England and New York also demanded cotton for their industry. And New York was closely tied to the cotton trade. Many Southern planters traveled there frequently for their business and cotton-related exports. Demand for cotton remained high until well after the American Civil War. The soils of the Delta became erosion and exhaustion filled due to flooding. Following the Civil War, 90% of the bottomlands in Mississippi were underdeveloped. This attracted workers to trade their labor in clearing the land to eventually purchase it from their sale of lumber. Tens of thousands of migrants, both black and white, were drawn to the area. By the end of the century, 2/3 of the independent farmers in the Mississippi Delta were black. Sharecropping and tenant farming replaced the slave-dependent plantation system.
We are seeking a political asylum within the borders of our own country. Many of them were fleeing for their lives. They were fleeing a caste system, a rigid caste system known as Jim Crow, in which everything that you could and could not do was based on what you looked like.
In 1915, African Americans began to leave the Black Belt for these new industrial centers. By 1929, 1.5 million African Americans had resettled in new northern metro areas. At the time, America's participation in World War I drove demand for manufacturing labor, but strict immigration laws left northern factories with a shortage of workers. Factories in the north started recruiting low-skilled workers from the south. The workers faced discrimination in their new homes, which culminated in the Red Summer of 1919. Migrant blacks, whites, and European immigrants were all competing for limited housing and resources, which exacerbated relationships in city centers. The most prominent of these settlements for migrating blacks was New York City, and the art, music, and theater that emerged from this community became known as the Harlem Renaissance. These artistic achievements redefined the cultural image of blacks in America. But the stock market crash of 1929 and ensuing Great Depression slowed the influx from the South and effectively ended the first migration. A second wave began in the 40s, when World War II kickstarted manufacturing again, while agricultural employment in the South plummeted. Once again, people living in the rural South began to migrate to cities. Manufacturing hubs in the West were far more prominent in this second movement, but only a fraction of skilled labor positions went to African Americans. That kind of discrimination was a common experience for participants in the Great Migration. Throughout history, the segregated neighborhoods that Southern blacks flocked to often became the ground centers of massive, racially motivated rioting. In most cases, the protesting began in response to perceived unfair treatment of the black community. This is a trend that continues today, as seen in modern violent protests in Baltimore, Ferguson, and Milwaukee. By the end of the second migration, an estimated 5 to 8 million blacks had resettled outside of the South.
Arriving in Chicago, Just 3 years after Muddy Waters arrived, Otis Smothers, later known as Big Smoky, arrived in the Windy City on December 21st, 1946. Not knowing he would be among the pioneers who would put Chicago on the map, giving Chicago its sound known as the Chicago Blues. Most of the blues singers in the South migrated to northern states. Louisiana, Memphis, and other southern states welcomed them. Chicago was one of the most known cities to welcome these musicians. Chicago became the blues recording capital of the world. Muddy Waters, Howlin Wolf, B.B. King, all came from the Mississippi Delta. They brought that gritty southern call and response, howls, growls, and riffs that can be heard in the Chicago blues. This rich music was developed from the struggles of black sharecroppers and farmers. One of these men was Otis Big Smoky Smothers. At 17 years old, he had seen enough of the cotton fields, his hands swollen from picking cotton and rounding up pigs and cows. These same hands had learned how to pick the guitar. He had played at school socials and became an eager learner, taught by his aunt, known as Aunt Sang.
I was aware of Big Smoky pretty early in my blues fan career through his records, particularly the King Records album, Low Down Back Porch Blues, and I've been impressed when I've seen articles and photos from Jimi Hendrix's London apartment when he was getting his big break there in the late 60s, because there was some analysis of his record collection, at least the part that he had with him over there, and one of the albums in the picture was Big Smoky's album, so Jimmy was obviously aware of Smokey in that record. I also particularly like Smokey's 45, I Got My Eyes on You. So I'm sure I met Smokey somewhere in the Chicago clubs, probably in the 70s, and Big Smoky was a much more down-home kind of person and artist. I thought he just had the southern country rhythms. He talked slower, he moved slower. His blues was a generation slower, more like Muddy Waters, Elmore James vintage, not the Kenny Burrell, B.B. King, Albert King jazzy touch that Little Smoky had. Little Smoky could sound just like Freddie Robinson, he could sound just like Wayne Bennett, and he was smooth when he wanted to be. Big Smoky was rough and old school. I'm told that he and Joe Carter, an Elmore James stylist, had a really good band in the 50s. I also remember a friend of mine who knew both Big and Little Smoky asked me one time how I would compare Little Smoky with his brother, and I asked her what she thought, and she started pointed at Little Smoky down the dinner table from us and said, "This one's more nervous." Nobody would describe Big Smoky as nervous that I knew. He told me a story I always liked about a country fish fry when he was a kid that Elmore James was playing at, and Smokey had a little beat-up toy guitar strapped on his back, probably with missing strings, and Elmore came up to him on a break and talked to him like he was a man and a musician and treated him with lots of respect and asked him if he could borrow the guitar, and Smokey was a little embarrassed, but he let Elmore take it up there, and Smokey said he sounded just like Elmore. You know, Smokey always was a warm guy. It was great to have him on the scene. It was great that he had a group of people around him, the ice cream man. He was really old school. He was willing to try certain things to stay current, too. But as I say, Big Smoky was a lot more old school than Little Smoky, and Big Smoky was one of the last real holdovers from that 50s scene, and it was always great to run into him, but of course he's gone too. But I always just enjoyed my personal actions. Big Smoky was about as nice as a person as I've ever met, and I'll never forget and never stop feeling privileged to know the Smothers family, including all the cousins and relatives who made music. That also includes Arlene Brown, about whom I wrote an article for Jefferson magazine in Sweden, and the other Brown brothers who were musicians around Chicago and St. Louis. But it's always been a great pleasure for me to be associated with the family. I'll never stop enjoying their music. I've got pictures up in my house on the walls. I'm wearing the t-shirt now from the Smothers family reunion, and I hope their music and their memories live forever.
Hello, I am the eldest daughter of Big Otis Smoky Smothers. My name is Emma Louise. I was named after my grandmother, Big Smoky's mother, Miss Emma, and my aunt, Louise, his sister. I just wanted to take just a couple of minutes and let you know how much I enjoyed as a toddler. I do remember my dad having jam sessions in Chicago on the south side, the lower east south side. Mr. Howlin Wolf would come over, various other wonderful musicians, and they would have jam sessions. My uncle Little Smoky would also come in and jam as well. I remember Mr. Wolf being a big, tall man, big hands, big feet, and a gruffy voice. I used to be afraid of him, but he was really a really nice man. I appreciate you all for tuning into this docudrama, and I also want to thank my sister Queen F. Smothers for her tireless work. And for everyone and their support, thank you all, and God bless. I also want to mention my mother, Miss Earlene Smothers, who wrote songs to the music for my dad. I miss them both so very dearly, and I hope everyone never forgets the impact of blues that my dad made. Thank you.
Smokey. So I'm going to do a song of his right now. Because as long as I walk the earth, there'll be a piece of Smokey Smothers walking the earth too. my money and my time. Just to know what you're doing. Cause you're mine, oh man. And I know you and I'm watching everything you do. That you think you're a star. That you think you're sick. If I find you with someone else, I'm gonna throw loving on you quick. You know I love it. That's what I do myself. Easy to call you. Love someone else. And my eyes on you, and I'm watching everything you do. That you think you're smart. I know that you think you're smart. If I find you with someone else, I'm gonna throw loving on you, baby. You know I love you. That's what I do myself. I'm on you. Loving someone else. Eyes on you, watching everything you do. Now then, keep it going. Now, would you do me a favor, please? Yes, right now. Could you do this for Smokey who's passed on? Would you sing a little bit of song with me? All you have to do is say, got my eyes on you. Got my eyes on you. I 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 got my eyes on you. Watching everything you do. Do it one time, more loud. Eyes on you. I got my eyes on you. Yes, eyes on you. I got my eyes on you. I got my eyes on you. And I'm watching everything you do.
Big Smoky Smothers. Well, I knew Big Smoky Smothers as a child. He used to always come around my house. In fact, he's my nephew and Racine Wilson's father. And he would come around, and we called him the ice cream man because he had his ice cream wagon, and we would get free ice cream from him. And he was always a real nice and happy person, you know. And he taught me my first guitar chord. First little song, what was the name of the song? You Don't Love Me, I think it was, yeah. He taught me that one Saturday. I think I had to be about 14 maybe. And his music still, it's entrenched in my heart because we always had Smokey Smothers music. He would always drop us music off at the house. And before I got in the blues business, he got called home to Blues Heaven. And I know he'd be real proud of me right now because he knew how much I always loved the blues, even as a young child. So if you knew Smokey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He was one hell of a guy. Nicest guy you can ever meet. His music still lives on because I am a member of the Cash Box Kings, and we recorded one of his songs. And hopefully we'll record some more in the near future. But Smokey, rest up in blues heaven. See you when I get there, brother. Later.
Yeah.
We have some guests in the house. Back when I first started playing in Chicago, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I met two wonderful brothers, Big Smoky Smothers and Little Smoky Smothers. And we have two daughters of Otis Smothers, known as Big Smoky, here today, Crystal and Emma. They were just, they wrote some great songs, and they performed around Chicago a lot, and their music touched a whole lot of people, and they made really great songs. So here's a song that's by Big Smoky that we're going to do here with Paul. Paul actually recently put out a lost session of Big Smoky that just came out, even though Smokey's been passed for a good 15, 20 years.
How are you?
And so here's a song called Searching for My Baby. Yeah. Searching for my baby, yeah, all the town. Searching for my baby, I know she put me down. Searching for my baby, yeah, searching for my girl.
We're gonna go and turn on one of those garbage cans and see what's in it. Whoa, look out at the weather. Woman, I believe it's gonna rain. Well, look out at the weather. Woman, I believe it's gonna rain. I went to check up on my baby, and she got another man. The weather seems so bad, darling, but it's raining way down in my heart. The weather seems so bad, darling. It's raining way down in my heart.
My name is Crystal Queen F. Smothers. I am the producer of the Smothers Brothers of Blues, the Chicago Blues Brothers. I was inspired to write this documentary based on my father and my uncle's lives, Big Smoky Smothers and Little Smoky Smothers. I was very, very impressed with what I've learned about my uncle and my dad as far as blues music. They were very influential in the Chicago blues and ushering that music genre. I was very excited when I got on Facebook and discovered that a lot of my dad's and uncle's friends and fans were on Facebook and they were uploading pictures, and it was very, very exciting because they loved my dad and they loved my uncle, and I realized what an influence that they had in blues music. So I was inspired to start researching more about Big Smoky Smothers and Little Smoky Smothers, and I discovered that they had placed their foot in the foot map of blues, Chicago blues. I remember being a young girl, and I remember my mother, Earlene Smothers, my dad's wife. She did tell me a lot about different blues musicians. I didn't know who these people were, but she would tell me about Jimmy Reed, Jimmy Rogers, Howlin Wolf, Muddy Waters, and she would just be so excited. She would be telling me about these blues musicians that her and my Auntie Lou would sit around, and they would be a part of their lives around the blues community. They would go out to nightclubs like the Playhouse, and they would listen to their music. And she met my dad at the Playhouse on the south side of Chicago. So as my mother would tell me these stories, it kind of went to the back of my mind. I didn't really think about it. But as I got older, I learned that there was a blues musician who was very influential, and his name was Muddy Waters. The way that I met Muddy Waters was not very pleasant. I met Muddy Waters May of 1983. It was at his funeral. I remember walking past his casket, and I looked in and peered and saw this older man with a big round face. What impressed me so much was there were so many other people who didn't look like me who were at Muddy Waters' funeral. There were so many people that I was amazed. I'm like, who is this man? McKinley Morganfield, Muddy Waters, is said to have said that blues will leave the south side of Chicago. And he was right. Blues music and musicians had went from the south side of Chicago to England, Germany, Japan, and many countries. This genre of music brought people together, and they seemed to be very happy. Blues didn't make you feel blue. It made you happy, it made you excited, but if you were in a mood, it would put you in that mood of blue if you were blue. So blues music has always been a part of American music and has inspired many generations of music. I was inspired to write the blues documentary by my Aunt Lou and my Uncle Elmore. You see, they were very influential in reciting the family history to me. I wanted to know more about my dad. I wanted to know more about where we came from. See, we came from Mississippi. My dad and my uncle, and my auntie, they were all born in Mississippi. They were separated, and the girls went with the mother and the boys went with the father. So the boys would work on the farm. My great-grandfather was a sharecropper, and My uncle tells me about the story of my dad, Big Smoky Smothers. He was 17 years old and he was tired. He had worked the farms, he worked with cows, and he wanted to leave Mississippi and he wanted to go to Chicago. But the farm owner did not want him to go to Chicago. He did not want him to leave the farm. He wanted him to stay and refused for Big Smoky to leave the farm. Well, my Uncle Elmore had just got out of the army and he arrived in Mississippi with his duffel bag, and he came upon the scene with my dad and the farm owner arguing because my dad wanted to leave and he didn't want him to leave. The word is, my uncle said that he reached in his pocket and he paid the farm owner $50 to release my dad. So December 21st, 1946, Big Smoky Smothers arrived in Chicago, the Windy City. And from there, he created a music history that has gone down and been a part of American music history and Black history. My uncle, Little Smoky Smothers, was a fun-loving man. He always had a joke. Every family reunion, every gathering, wherever you went, Little Smoky had something funny to say. He kept everyone rolling and laughing, and he could play the blues. His blues can be synonymous with Albert King and B.B. King, the fast type of style music of blues. That was him. He produced many albums, Boss Man and Second Time Around. He will forever be missed. My Auntie Lou gave me an enriched history lesson, a lesson that I would not learn from the school books or from my high school education or grade school education. I would call her on the phone and she would talk and it would be run-on sentences, and I would want to reach and find a pen or a pad to write down everything she was saying because it was part of American history. How Big Smoky Smothers and Little Smoky Smothers migrated from the Delta South of Mississippi and arrived in Chicago and changed the blues scene. She would tell me tales about Little Walter, Howlin Wolf, and my mother, she would also tell me stories just like she was talking about any everyday life. But yet she was talking about these blues legends that everyone had become fond of. Europe, England, Japan, all of these countries and many more would know about the young men on the south side of Chicago who put Chicago blues on the map. Blues wives, married to the blues. Many don't know, but many of these sidemen, who we call sidemen, who actually laid down the Chicago blues sound. These men had wives who were very influential in the blues scene and in their husbands' lives. These women have made history on their own. One of the women is my mother, Earlene Smothers. My mother was very supportive of her husband, Big Smoky Smothers. They married and had 5 kids. I'm one of them. It was fun growing up, but at the time when I had got older from being a toddler, my mom and my dad separated, so I didn't see a whole lot of my dad. He was working the blues scene, and he wasn't a part of my life. And I would see him every now and then. It had an effect on me because I wanted that closeness, but yet he wasn't in the home. But that is one of the sacrifices that music has. Sometimes the kids suffer, sometimes the wives suffer. While the fans are adorning, sometimes there's lack in the home. My dad and my mom, they loved each other so much. My mother would dress my dad so he could be on the stage looking good in his suits. And Muddy Waters would say, "Oh, Smokey, you sure looking good in that suit." My mother took care of the business side of the blues. And she would often tell my dad, you know, you need to kind of get your things copywritten. You need to get some things on paper. My dad just wanted to play the blues. So later on in life, it was my mom that took care of the business side. My father was a composer of 32 songs of blues. I can't judge nobody. Honey, I ain't teasing. Give me that wig back. I've been drinking Muddy Waters. My dog can't bark, which Muddy Waters recorded later on in life. These were all songs composed by Big Smoky Smothers. The down, soft, south, gritty, slow blues from the Delta that you can hear in Robert Johnson and Jimmy Reed, that was my dad's style, and many loved it. He was a blues pioneer. The other blues wife is Shirley Smothers. Shirley Smothers is the wife of Little Smoky Smothers. Shirley and Abe, Little Smoky, loved each other very much. There wasn't a time that I didn't see Abe, that I didn't see Shirley. I can often see them together. And as my uncle got on the blues scene, Shirley would work and she would take care of the home and she would support her husband. It was just a really fun, loving time. You know, during reunions, you would see them. Of course, my uncle would be joking about someone and just providing laughter to the whole family. But Shirley was a hard-working woman. She loved Big Smoky, Little Smoky. Sick. Shirley was a fun-loving wife, and she loved Little Smoky. You know, Little Smoky is known for his good cooking. He taught Shirley how to cook. They were both a duel. The other blues wife is that I want to talk about. The other blues wife that I want to talk about is Marie Dixon. Marie Dixon is wife to blues legend, composer Willie Dixon. Willie Dixon is said to compose a catalog of songs for blues. You can see his portrayal in the movie Cadillac Records, portrayed by Cedric the Entertainer. Marie Dixon supported her husband. She loved him. They had a whole tribe of kids and grandkids. I met Marie Dixon years ago. Unfortunately, it was not a good time that we met. I met Marie Dixon at her son and Willie Dixon's son, Butch Dixon's funeral in Chicago. But as I sat across this young lady at the repast, she was full of grace. She was peaceful. She was quiet. She didn't cry a tear. I just realized how strong she was because she had lost her husband. She had lost her daughter, Shirley Dixon. And then some years later, Butch, she lost him, her son. So I just admire her strength. But Marie Dixon, what she did that influenced blues music was the royalties and the Blues Heaven Foundation. It is said that Marie Dixon would write down Willie Dixon's song. So one day she heard a song by Led Zeppelin on the radio. Marie Dixon realized this song was a song that belonged to her husband, who had written the song. And so what happened was they wind up suing Led Zeppelin, and they won the settlement. They formed the Blues Heaven Foundation, which is housed in the old Chess Records, located at 2120 South Michigan on the south side of Chicago. So although Willie Dixon did not see great fame and fortune when he was alive, his wife, Marie Dixon, she secured their royalties. And what she did was she secured the royalties of other blues wives and other people who had lost their loved ones, but did not see the financial residuals of royalties from their music. My mother read an article about Marie Dixon and the Blues Heaven Foundation, and this is what spurred her to go forward in securing that my father's legacy was protected. And so this was a wonderful time that these blues wives had actually joined forces, and they actually start making others be beneficial to the blues royalties that was due their family. So as you can see, the blues wives were influential in the Chicago blues. They were influential in those seeking their royalties, and they will forever be missed.
television.
Okay, now when did you and Big Smoky meet and where?
Because I woke this morning in the hurricane's eye.
We met at University of Chicago. And on the quads.
On the campus?
Yeah, on the campus. It was called the Quad. So he was selling ice cream, and he had like a, a bicycle with a cooler on it, and he was selling ice cream. And I was introduced to him by Dave Wallman. So that's when I met him. And then I started to go see him play a lot. That had to be probably around 1990.
Okay, wonderful. And how did he inspire you? Like for instance, you did his "Got My Eyes on You" on your Coming Out of Chicago CD. What most inspired you?
I guess it's because I knew him personally, and I knew what a good man he was. And he didn't have to talk to me and give me a chance to play, and he would let me play with him on his shows. Play a song or two. He didn't have to do that, because I was like a total nobody, He was a kind, nice person, and I really liked his songs, and his songs were like catchy blues songs. Like they were blues songs, but they were kind of catchy too.
Yeah. And
he had a special feel to his music. So between that, that's what his songs were special, and he was a special person.
Oh, thank you. What inspires you to keep playing blues? And that's my last question.
I love the whole lifestyle. It's not always easy, but I love it. I love the people. I love playing for the people. It's all worth it. So I just stick with it. I don't know what else I would do with myself. You know what I mean? I like playing for the people. If I didn't play for 6 months or something, I think I would go a little bit crazy, A lot of people would say that, I think. I'm not musicians, they do it because they sort of have to do it, So I love to play the music, and I love to connect to the people, and that's my thing. That's what I do.
Wonderful. Well, you do it very well.
All right.
And thank you. Great show.
I definitely feel like my grandfather and my uncle played a big part in contributing to the Chicago blues scene. As far as that goes, they were definitely underdogs in my opinion. And they accomplished many things that I'm still looking to accomplish in my career. And in many ways, they inspire me because, growing up, listening to their music and seeing what they've done, it's like, okay, I can do this too. And it was like, let me go ahead and continue this legacy, I thought of that at a young age. I'm like, I want to do what my granddaddy was doing. I want to do what my uncle's doing,
Oh, yeah. One day I'm gonna catch you soon. Said I'll be so glad. I'll be glad when I get my groove back again. Oh Lord, have mercy. Yes, I know. 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 I said I've been trying get my groove back up again, dude.
Hi, this is Dick Shurman. I am a Chicago-based blues producer and historian. I produce Little Smoky's 2 CDs under his own name and Lee Shot Williams's Cold Shot CD on Black Magic. I never was in the studio with Big Smoky, but I knew him fairly well and liked him a lot. So I want to talk about my friendships and working relationships with these 3 brothers and cousins who I've always been very proud to know. Let me talk about Little Smoky first. I became aware of him when I came back to the University of Chicago to start school in the fall of '68 and met a couple brothers around the campus area, the Burgin brothers, who used to go see Little Smoky a lot at the Playhouse, and they would talk about him. And I remember they'd say, "Oh yeah, there's one Smoky that made all the records, but we go see the other one because he's working a lot more." And it was true at that time. I don't think Little Smoky had done much recording, certainly nothing under his own name. And Big Smoky had the Lowdown Back Porch Blues album on King and a few other 45s. So the Burgin brothers told me about Little Smoky, and then one night in early '69, I was at Pepper's Lounge on 43rd Street, and Little Smoky and Fred Johnson, who owned the Playhouse and a lot of other places where Smoky worked over the years, was riding around with Smoky in his taxi cab, and they stopped by Pepper's and sat in for a little bit. And so that's the first time I heard Smoky live. I don't remember talking to him much at all, but I remember being impressed by his playing in an Albert King mode that night. And then about a year later, I had moved back to Seattle, where I grew up, to finish school. And in late '69, a couple friends of mine out there wanted to get into the blues booking biz, so they wrote me in. I knew a lot of the Chicago people, so they asked me to help them out, and we booked Magic Sam to come out and play some dates in the Pacific Northwest. Unfortunately, we did that on a Sunday, and the next morning I got a phone call that Magic Sam had died suddenly of a heart attack, not his first heart problem, unfortunately. So to fill in for Magic Sam, we ended up booking Johnny Littlejohn, and he brought Little Mac Simmons's band to back him, partly because Mac had a working van. After I heard the cassette that Bill Warren made of Smoky, I was an even bigger fan, but I didn't see much of him. He wasn't playing much then. He was working to raise his family. But in the mid-'70s, my friend Steve Weisner wrote an article for Living Blues about Big and Little Smoky, and we got to be more in touch. And then in 1979, plans were made for Little Smoky to go to Europe with the American, what the heck was it called? It was for promoter Jim Simpson. It was a package tour. I think it was American Blues Legends. And Smoky did record a couple of cuts in Chicago for the CD, but when it came time to do the tour, Smoky just decided he couldn't afford to do it. It didn't pay very well, and he had his day job, which he needed, so he passed on the tour. And then around that same time, my friend Steve Weisner recorded Mojo Buford's album. I think it was called Windy City Blues Summit, and among the several guitar players that he used was Little Smoky on that CD, and Smoky played my Gibson 345 guitar, and in fact he put the pickguard on it that I still have there. So that was the first time I actually got to work with Smoky, and we were good friends, and that friendship deepened because of his friendship with Elvin Bishop, and they would often get together when Elvin would come through town. In 1991, I believe it was, excuse me, let's try that sentence again. In 1991, the Alligator Records 20th anniversary tour came through Chicago, and I was talking to Elvin backstage, and he told me he really wanted to help Little Smoky, that he couldn't afford to invest in an album, but he really wanted to do whatever he could to help make an album happen. So I had been producing different artists for Black Magic Records in Holland, and I contacted them about doing a Smokey CD with Elvin and also with Billy Flynn and Lee Shot, and they were very enthusiastic, so we cut that CD, which turned out to be Boss Man, and it got I believe it was still a Handy Award, but we were happy about that, and it helped put Smokey on the map a little bit.
Oh, me and Smoke? Lee, I don't know. Someplace, maybe the Blue Flame, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Chicago in 1960,
Yeah.
Smokey used to have a big old process, big nice process, be real sharp.
Still got it.
Yeah.
Ain't been no peace in the barnyard since that little body knocked me onion mouth, yellow teeth, cross-eyed, eyeglass.
Big Smoky Smothers and Little Smoky Smothers never recorded together, but they were very close brothers. They loved one another, and there was never any feuding. Although many compare them to one another, they were two different musicians. One was the gritty down south, low, slow blues that my dad played, the southern blues of Delta, and one was the more contemporary blues, which Little Smoky played, like Albert King and B.B. King, a more fast rhythm. So they were two different musicians, even though they played the same genre. So you could never compare the two because they are genius and legends in their own rights. On a warm summer day, in July of 1993, Little Smoky Smothers had not heard from his brother, Big Smoky Smothers, and he continuously called him on the phone to no avail. Little Smoky Smothers decided to go over to Big Smoky Smothers' house, and there, after finding someone to unlock the secure gated door, Little Smoky Smothers discovered his brother Big Smoky Smothers dead. That was a really tough time for our family. It was totally unexpected. My dad was sick and he didn't tell anyone. I remember the last time I saw him, he looked frail. His eyes didn't look the same. He had lost weight. We didn't know that he had lung cancer. When his brother found him, I'm sure that was a devastating time for him. But we had a beautiful service for Big Smoky at the same location as Muddy Waters, the Metropolitan Funeral Home on the south side of Chicago. And the blues community came out and the fans came out, and it was a beautiful ceremony. But it was at that time that my mom, for the first time, I saw her break down. As they were about to close the casket, she stood over the casket and she cried and cried and cried. That was a tough time for us. One thing that I do know is that blacks have always wanted a better way of life. So they would seek that out. You know, they've always wanted to be a part of the world and to show their geniuses and to share their love, to share their joys, to share their knowledge, agriculture, music-wise. Blacks have been of great influence in American history.